September. You're with Marie from Skeinz. And how is everybody? It is stunningly sunny here today. Good to see spring is beginning to sprung here down in the Southern Hemisphere, which is just wonderful. Big shout out to everybody that shopped in the opening day of our sale yesterday. It was an absolutely epic day. We apologise if the website was a little bit slow because you guys really did come in there in mass, but that's okay. I've checked stocks this morning. Everything is still looking great. I've added a few new things this morning. We've also got some more stock clearers checking with the mill, and we've got more stocks coming from the mill to the store later today. So I will be giving you an update and flying solo tomorrow. So we'll be having a huge, big catch up on the Knit August night sale tomorrow. So that's all to look forward to here on the Quarantine Diaries. But I'm not going to muck around because I am so thrilled to welcome back to the Diaries, and this time in living colour. Last time we did this, I think we did it on a link over the phone. So I'm utterly, utterly delighted to welcome Charles Gandy. How are you?
Hey Marie, how are you?
Good. I just remember we did it over the phone last time, didn't we?
Exactly, and actually I was sitting in a car in a parking lot away from where I live because my internet was not so good then, but I have better internet now. So isn't it amazing we can do this?
Oh, I
Here.
know. And so much has changed because so for everyone that hasn't met Charles, this is the wonderful Charles Gandy, master knitter. Do a little introduction to yourself, Charles, about who you are and how you landed with knitting, and then we'll talk about where you are right now.
Okay, well, I am, I've been knitting. Are you ready for this? 68 years. I learned to knit when I was 4 years old, and you're supposed to say, "Oh, you don't look that old." But my mother had a small shop, nothing like what we have today, and she was a knitwear designer, and she taught me to knit, but I never remember learning. I went to the first grade of school, and I found out that everyone didn't knit, especially the boys. But people said to me, "Well, weren't you bullied?" And I said, "No, I wasn't bullied because I like to knit, and I was proud of it. And I think in order to be bullied, it has to be effective. So since it didn't bother me, I mean, they may have bullied me for a couple of weeks, but then it didn't work, so they quit doing it. I designed my first sweater when I was 7. I still have that sweater, and I should have dug it out to show you, but it was rather clever, if I do say so myself. You know, Mother had this yarn shop, and you buy skeins of yarn in bags of 10, and so that's why you see a lot of books that are called one skein wonders and two skein wonders, because there are ways to sell those odd lots of yarn. Well, I designed a sweater that buttons down the back and it buttons down the front, so you only had to make half a sweater or half a vest, so that was a way of helping her to sell that yarn. Don't you think that was pretty clever at
Oh,
7
that's
years?
fantastic. That's
But
fantastic.
I went on to have a degree in interior design for 35 or 40 years, and but all along I knitted. I have a minor degree from university in weaving, even though I haven't touched a loom in 50 years. But I was always had needlepoint in my hands or knitting in my hands. And finally, I retired from my business 20 years ago. Hard to believe, but I retired way too early financially. But I decided that I would just get out of the rat race that I was in. And I started then devoting more and more time to knitting. And I think it was 2010 or 2011 that I went through the TKGA, the Knitting Guild Association's Master Knitting Program, which there are 350 or so of us worldwide that have that distinction. And it really, even though I'd been knitting all those decades, it really kind of quantified and qualified my knitting, and it's made me I guess I think it was a good thing. Sometimes now I look at covers of magazines and I see these horrible mistakes on things, and I think, just don't look, sometimes. But I spend most of my day all day knitting, and I work one day a week in a local yarn shop, which just is a good way for me to keep my pulse on what people are working on. And anyway, is that enough to tell you people who I am and who I am?
Absolutely, and I'm glad you brought up the local yarn store because I mean this is what a small world this is. I have a friend who is also American, and her husband is a surgeon and worked at. He comes out. He does. He's sort of. He's like a Oh, what's the best way to?
traveling.
Yeah, traveling.
Tra-
Yeah, traveling. He's sort of like a semi-retired but traveling locum, and so he literally travels the world. They spend a lot of time in Africa, and he has been down to New Zealand to do some locums. So, and he's done about 3 or 4 of these, and I've met him and his wife through our other business with my husband, which and so we'd known each other for a couple of years. And then it worked out that when her husband did one of these traveling visitations to Charles's neck of the woods, and this
which
couple are
is
from South
which
Dakota.
is yeah there my shop is in North Carolina, which is hundreds, thousands of miles away.
Away from where she is in
Yeah,
Sioux Falls. So, yeah, and so she would start going to that store as a local yarn store and met Charles, and yeah, we both knew each other. So then the best part is when you came to New Zealand to do Knit August Nights, it timed with them coming to New Zealand to do the locum, so we were all able to be together, which was so much
it was
fun.
lovely. It was
It
just
was
lovely. Yeah,
really
and
lovely, and
we talk
everyone
about
is.
you all the time, Marie. Every time she's in the shop, and she only comes to North Carolina maybe for 2 or 3 weeks every 6 or 8 weeks because
Yeah,
her husband's traveling all over.
all over.
But
I
Kristen is
know.
a wonderful knitter, and we've had a great time, and we laugh about you and talk about you, and so it's great.
It just shows you how small the world truly is. Everyone is pouring in, Charles, and there's so many here from Knit August Nights that met you and
Oh,
they're all
good.
saying
Well, I
hello,
hope to
which
come
is
back
wonderful.
sometime whenever you finally can have Knit August nights again.
I know. We had to
Great
postpone
place
this
right
year.
now.
So, of
Yeah.
course, you can see this beautiful woods behind you, and we had full stream before. So, when we first did this last time, you had just purchased your Airstream trailer and you had moved, and you would literally, I think you'd only been there a matter of weeks, hence no internet and everything. So, explain where you are and
Well, I live in the mountains of North Georgia, which is, if you know anything about the topography of the United States, I'm at the beginning or the end, depending on how you look at it, of the Appalachian Trail, where people hike through all these beautiful mountains. I'm at the base of the Blue Ridge Smoky Mountains, and if you ever come this way, we'll have to go take a tour because they get their name legitimately because they look like smoke is coming off of them. Anyway, I had a beautiful lake house that I had for 30 years that I owned with a friend of mine, and it was a weekend house for us because our careers were both based in Atlanta, which is about 2 hours away from us here. But this was a weekend house for us. And then when I retired, I moved into it full time. And Brad decided that he was real estate poor with other real estate, and he wanted to sell that house, and I didn't have enough money to buy him out, and so we had to sell the house in order for him to get out of it, which I'm sorry about because I love that house. But I bought this Airstream trailer and or RV or caravan, however you call it, and I live full time. I have 3.5 acres of land where I created my own home site with electricity and power, water and all that stuff. But until the COVID came along, I was traveling quite a bit.
Mm.
I've been all across the country, and
So the name of your trailer is called Pearl.
oh yes, yes. And for a while I was maintaining a blog on Facebook called Pearling Across America, where I was kind of documenting what we were doing. But that's kind of fallen by the wayside. If I ever start traveling again, I'll do it. Right now, it's just not the time
No, no.
to go. But anyway, it's the only problem is I don't have as much studio space as I would
Mm.
like to have, so I just have to be careful. But I have some external warehouses, or storehouses where I keep my stash of yarn, and it works. It's
Yeah,
fun.
well, and it can be done. I interviewed a couple of days ago a lady who does also as a tutor at Knit August Nights, and she lives in a tiny house on Waiheke Island. And, as she said, the creativity for her was the most important. So what she's done is very similar to you. She has pods outside, which she realized how much room bathrooms and kitchens and all these things take up. She minimalized those down, and in her tiny house, she has her sleeping area upstairs in a mezzanine, and the entire ground floor of the little tiny house is her creative
Work.
studio.
Yeah. Well, I have 200 square feet of space. That's what I live in. But it's fine. It's fine. So you can store a lot of yarn in a lot of nooks and
Yes.
crannies. Yeah. So
Absolutely, absolutely. So we're going to launch it and we're going to talk about some designs because you have, I mean, the breadth of your work is massive. I think we're going to start. I'm going to start with probably one of the most recent first because this is something that I talked about both on the Skeinz Diaries and within a newsletter, and that is your serape, your summer serape poncho, which I just love. And you've got it there. So talk us through that. Talk us through some of the techniques in that, and then we can sort of talk about sort of yarns and yarn substitutions and things like that.
yeah, well, it's hard to maybe show the whole thing, but it's based on a U.S. Southwestern kind of attitude, if I can find the thing. And it's basically just two rectangles that had been
Mm.
knitted. They were knitted this, knitted this way and then turned horizontally. I call it railroading. I railroaded the fabric after I had knitted these two rectangles, and then I put them together on the shoulder with a detail that I think is kind of interesting, if I do say so myself, if I can get into the camera right. I did a 3 needle bind off here where I picked up stitches along the neck edge. You see here, here's the neck. So I picked up
Mm.
stitches on either side of both pieces and I knitted a few rows, and then in contrasting color, I did a 3 needle bind off, but I did it on the top of the work. Normally a 3 needle bind off,
Is on
goes
the bottom.
inside, but I put this on the exterior to make it like a textural detail, so it would relate to the rest of the garment. And then, so I think that's kind of an interesting um, little technique here. I mean, this is a very simple knit for anybody to do, pretty
Mm.
much. But the other thing that I like here is this detail here of
Yeah,
this kind of
braid. It's really pretty.
that,
What's that?
that braid. This is a technique. I'm trying to find the right look for the camera, but you can see it, can't you?
Yes, we can.
Kind of a mock braid there. It's in a couple of places here. That detail comes from a stitch dictionary that I found and that I love. It's by a Swedish woman named Britt Marie Christensen. Her book is called Pop Knitting, and it's just filled with wonderful different approaches and different techniques about doing. It's not a stitch dictionary and a knit purl kind of thing. It's a stitch dictionary using color, using slip stitches. And this braid is an example that does what I did here. The light blue that you see there was knitted until I got to this braid, and then I bound off my work with
Oh,
alternating white and dark blue. The work is bound off, and then on the immediate next row, I pick up the purl bumps and continue to knit again.
wow.
Such a simple, such a simple, but I think very effective. Looks like I made a mistake there, but it's just a long. But isn't that effective?
Oh,
It's
it's
just
fabulous.
simply bound off. You bind off the whole work, alternating the colors, or you don't have to alternate the colors. You could keep them all the same, and
Yeah.
then you pick up stitches on the next round. A little hint on that: what I do when I pick up those purl bumps, I use a needle or two smaller
Mm.
size. It's
And a
easier to
lace
pick
tip
up.
is and a lace tip's quite
Lace
good
tip.
too.
Yeah, lace
Mm.
tip. And sometimes I'll even use something. I'll only pick up 4 or 5 or 10 at a time, and I'll use a double point needle,
Mm.
but at least a size or two down, because you're actually making the stitch on the needle you're working on.
Yeah.
So it makes it so much easier to pick that up. But I think that's kind of an interesting thing. And I think that this it takes a DK weight yarn, and I'm sure you have in Skeins, you've got wonderful yarns that would work for this.
Well,
Um,
we've got a sale at the moment, and one of the yarns on sale is our vintage DK, which is a four-fold twisted yarn, worsted
yeah,
yarn, and it's lovely smooth definition, but it has beautiful contemporary colours that would
yeah.
still give you that gorgeous southwestern feel like you have there.
But you could change it and make it pastels,
Oh
and it
yeah.
would be lovely too, or whatever you wanted to do. It
And
takes,
it's also a great stash buster. What sort of average per shade did you use in that, Charles? What sort of
well,
like
I used 100. This was a Queensland, I think it's an Australian yarn
mhm.
that is now discontinued. But I should have looked at the pattern, but it took 800-gram skeins of yarn. Uh, 7 of them were on the darker blue, believe it or not, took 2 skeins,
Mm.
and each of the other colors took 1 skein. Uh, and I think probably I had some bits and pieces left over, but basically it
Yeah.
takes 800 grand skeins of yarn, because you see it's pretty, it's big
Yeah.
enough to fit you and me, Marie.
Yeah.
So I mean, it would fit most people,
Right, and I'm going to pop this pattern up in into the. So I'm going to share this up onto the screen for everybody so they can see it. So I've got it everything sitting up here. So
Right, good.
let's do
How do
this.
you, I want to know, how do you talk to people and read all these wonderful notes that people are writing? I don't see how you do that. You're a pro with
Uh,
it.
oh,
Yeah.
it takes a it's yeah. Let's put it this way. I've had to dig out latent skills, Charles, that I haven't had for a very long time,
Well, you
and
do a great job. Yeah, there it is
there
on the
it's
mannequin.
there
So
on the mannequin, and that's what I love about. I love things like this with color and texture, and it's almost like a sampler in ways,
yeah,
and
that-
and you wouldn't have to if you didn't want to, guys. You wouldn't have to necessarily. You could stick to the same color combinations, or you could play around with it. I mean, you could use this pattern very much as a guide, couldn't you?
exactly. And I also, yeah, I left the sides open. If you wanted, you could stitch the sides together or leave a vent at the bottom. You could make it a little more structured than what I've done here, but
Yeah,
I
I've
left it.
just put that shoulder detailing up on the screen for everybody
Yeah,
so you can see that in more detail. It is, and I love that. I'd never thought to do that three needle bind off in reverse and create it as a feature. I think that's a fantastic idea. And it does, because I'm very fond of a three needle bind off, and I have had a conversation often about, because shoulders, as you know, often with seamless designs can get a little bit floppy, and
right, right.
yeah, and I know that's one of the things with a seamed shoulder does actually often hold a really good structural purpose. So it's actually neat to
Good.
take that structural element and turn it into a design feature.
I learned that, or I was made aware of that by a wonderful designer named Catherine Lowe. Catherine with a C and Lowe, Lowe. She has a book called The Raveled Sleeve, and she does a lot of special kinds of techniques. And she calls this a joinery. She doesn't call it a
Mm.
bind off. She calls it a joinery, and she does a lot of things. And a number of years ago, I did an interview with her that was published in one of our magazines, Interweave or one of those magazines. And I did a question and answer kind of interview with her. And then she designed a garment, and I designed a garment based on what she had done. And I called it the On the Edge. It was a poncho again. It's interesting, and it was called the On the Edge poncho. And I did this kind of a thing all the way around the whole poncho and put it together that way. And she many times will do a contrasting color with this, like I have here, so that it does make for an interesting texture there.
Mm.
So try it on things. I mean, if it doesn't work, don't, I mean, take it out.
Exactly, exactly.
Yeah,
And I think
yeah.
I know that when we talked about the Master of Knitting program last time, but I know that one of the things with having spoken to ones that have completed it or are part way through it is it enables you to hone and sharpen all of those skills and look at things from a different attitude or a different perspective in order to create, uh,
Well,
you know,
what I think it did for me, and I thought about this a lot because I really do like to promote the Master and Ding program. It gave me an arsenal of tools,
mm,
or it helped me fill my toolbox so that
yeah,
I kind of know different decreases and I know different increases and I know all these different things that when it comes time to design something, I can then think through, well, all right, which one of those is going to be best for this?
yeah,
Like the three needle bind off on the exposed side. I mean, so for nothing else, the master's program was good for that. So,
yeah,
uh,
yeah. And it is,
can I
and it,
show you some? Oh, go ahead.
no, go.
I'm,
You should. I'd like show and
I,
tell. I'd much rather show and
yeah, I
tell.
was going to show you a sock that I've been having fun. Everybody knows me for my socks, but I thought I've got to make socks a little simpler. And so I've been doing socks. If I can get into I've been doing socks where I create my own stripes, and I'll get a self-striping yarn, but instead of using it as it comes off the skein or off the ball, I will alternate, and I'll work from the beginning of the ball and the end of the ball, and I'll work 5 or 6 rounds in one color, and then I'll work the from the other end of this thing. So this is a self-striping yarn, one skein of yarn. This is one skein of yarn. It was a sour ball from Skeinz, I think. I don't know if you know that yarn, but
Yeah,
any
we do.
self-striping yarn would work. Uh, and I think it's very effective. And it's an easy way for people to create their own design without having to do a lot of trouble. So this I call the simple striped sock. And so I thought I'd show you that because it's a good way for people to, as I say, create their own. Or it's also a good way to use up those bits and pieces of leftover fingering weight yarn. You know, you could
Yeah.
just put them in a grab bag and knit till you run out. What fun would that be? You
And
know.
the other technique that you used this on as well, which I loved, was, and I'm just jumping into it now, everyone gets to see me searching live, was the shawl, the scarf that you did. There it is, there, the shaded lines shawl, because you did a
Oh
similar
yeah,
thing
yeah.
with that. You started sort of at one end of the ball, and then and this is great because I mean, we have at Skeinz the opal yarns when we can get them in, but
Mm-hmm.
we also have, what I loved about this striping is you, as you said, you can play around with things you've got in stash. You can create your own yarns. It's
Mm-hmm.
about putting different angles and textures on things to create these incredible colors.
Well, this is a simple pattern here. This I forget what I called it, but uh, that was done with
Shaded lines shawl, you called it.
shaded line shawl. Yeah, and that was done with Connie, which is a Danish yarn that has a really long
Yes.
colorway, but it could work with anything. And that was actually done with two skeins of Connie, so it was two different colorways. And then I worked at the beginning and the end of the ball mid for half of it, and then the other half is the other beginning and end of the ball. So, but you can create your own thing, and it
Yeah.
really it's effective. I did another sock called. See if you can find the one for the tabby toed
Oh,
sock.
the tabby toe. Yes, I can do the tabby
Yeah,
toe.
I love this sock. And I actually just pulled them off. I hope they're not too dirty. I just pulled them off my feet. I like to wear what we call flip flops. I don't know what you call them.
Jandals.
Jandals. Okay, that's a wonderful word. But I like to wear jandals, but I still want my feet to be a little bit warm. So this was a case of using a self-striping yarn with a solid that I found to go with it. The black here is the solid, and then I striped every 8 or 10 rows or rounds. I changed, and then I did the tabby toed, which is like like a thumb for your
Hmm.
foot. And I think it's a fun sock,
Oh, it's a
and
really
uh,
fun sock.
and and it's fun to wear. And when I wear them out, people always are looking at me like, "Are you nuts?" But then they'll come up and say, "Where did you get those socks?" And I went, then it's a whole nother conversation. So I don't wear it too much because it causes too much conversation. But
Oh, I
anyway,
love it. No, but they
people might like
are
to see
fun.
that.
And we love wearing jandals, or actually the other name, the Australians often call those thongs, which of course
Yeah,
thong
we
means
don't
a
wear.
whole,
That's another thing here.
it's a
Thong
whole
is a
nother
different.
thing there, exactly.
Yeah.
So, but I mean, they're a really practical idea. They're just wonderful. I think they're so much fun. So
Yeah,
much
I
fun.
like.
Now, the other, just having it, because I haven't dived into your Revelry store for ages. I see you've been doing a lot of Christmas. You've been preparing for Christmas very early,
Well,
Mr.
we had at the shop, we had the 31st of July, we had a Christmas in July day where we decorated the store with Christmas trees, and we had Christmas music and Christmas food, and I mean and it was the busiest day in the entire history of this 15-year-old shop. That's
Wow.
how popular this was. And I did all kinds of things. And one of the things that I did were these ornaments. And they're actually wine toppers. They're a gift thing. I should have a bottle of wine, but I hollowed out the ornament. You see, it's on a styrofoam ball. Do you call it
Oh,
styrofoam
yeah,
ball?
yeah.
Yeah, styrofoam ball. And I hollowed that out and then put white glue in there so that the styrofoam wouldn't keep coming out. Let it go. And then I put the ornament on it so it sits on. It's a bottle topper. When you give a bottle of wine to someone, then if after they've had their wine, they can put
They
it
can
on their
pop it on
tree.
the tree.
Right. And I did. Oh, I don't know. I did 5 or 6 different designs. Here's one with holly leaves on it. That was fun. And again, it's hollowed out. But I did all kinds of things. I did some wine sacks. See if you can find those on the
The
Ravelry
wine
page.
sacks. Okay.
Wine sacks, again, the idea of gift giving and something you can do with a simple skein of yarn and uh, somewhere in there. And
Oh, here it is. Here's the wine sack.
see the wine sack. Yeah, aren't they fun? Uh,
Oh,
again,
look at that. Yeah. And I
again,
love this
just
one. This is a little technique. I love this technique you have with the little twisted cords with the beads.
the
That's
twist.
gorgeous.
Yeah, and I also did one of some of those twists where I just did just the twist, and it works great for the like a little wreath to go on top of a wine bottle, or it would also work for the base of a candle, or one of the colleagues in the shop gives soup mixes and things like that for Christmas. So she put it on the top of her jar with just that twist technique there. So yeah, so we had a great time with that. Chris